Hello everybody and welcome to another From the Depths Boat Building Basics. My name is Colin and today we're going to be looking at adding some missiles to our ship. So this will be a very brief tutorial purely because I honestly forgot to add missiles to this boat in our previous episodes, so we're going to take a look at that now. Now if you're just building any other kind of ship, like you're not on this specific ship that we worked on, does not matter as long as you have either empty space on the inside of the ship or empty space on the top of the ship. Does not matter. Now to begin, I would really recommend just finding that spot of empty space in your ship. For example, there's one right here for our ship, to begin building your missile system. For this example, we're going to be using an inside and an outside missile system. So we're going to be using straight normal missiles, and we're going to be using a form of torpedo. So let's just go right ahead and start making a little inside area for our missiles. We're going to do this by just carving out this little area right here for our missiles. Alright, now every missile system always has the same components. Now, as long as you understand that there's a launcher, a gantry, and a hatch, then the size of the missile does not matter. It's personal preference, though I will say that for the large and the huge missiles, you do need a good amount of either height or length just to be able to make it a functioning missile, a working missile. But to start, we are going to be selecting this controller here. The controller is in charge of every part of the missile. Essentially, it's going to be making sure that we have everything we need for our missiles, including AI connection, and eventually we're going to be adding fire control to it too. So I just added these missile connectors. These are what the launchers have to connect to. This connects between the missile controller and the connectors and the launchers. You'll see if I just remove it, they simply will not work. They just cease to function entirely. Now, we don't need them to be directly under our missiles, but we do need them to be connecting to all silos. So something that if we had a slightly wider area for this, I would probably do a launcher on either side of these connectors so that we have one extra block of length and we just have extra surface area of missiles. Next, I turned off the mirroring function because we're going to be adding two extra things right here. We're going to be adding this identify friend or foe add-on. So this tells the missile that we are not an enemy ship. If this is destroyed, then the missiles will they'll launch out, turn right around, and just smack us right back. So we do not want that to happen, so of course we're going to avoid that. Now, we're also adding a missile staggered fire add-on. Now this is optional, but this is something that I usually recommend because it helps coordinate the amount of missiles that you want to launch at one time. If you don't have this on, every single missile silo will launch all of its missiles at the same time, which can kind of end up looking like a little bit of a shotgun of missiles, which I do enjoy sometimes, but that's not really what we're going for right now. We want a easy to control and an easy to fire missile system. So that is actually all the command we need for just the missiles themselves. We could also, again, just like the advanced cannons, set a control. I usually would put this at 3 or 4, though that is personal preference, and of course it depends on what your primary weapon is. Now, again, if y'all aren't seeing that control method where it lets you pick between a weapon slot 1 through 9, you can find that in options and in miscellaneous over on this right. You just scroll right down and you'll see right here. Weapon options allows the use of 9 weapon slots. Make sure that you have that activated. Everything else you don't really have to mess with. Just that really helps you maintain control over specific areas of your vehicle. Alright, now let's do our AI. Of course, we always want to have some form of AI control. We don't necessarily have to if you don't want your AI to be constantly shooting missiles all the time. Or you could select a certain amount of range, which you can do right here, range bracket. Now, I will not be using an AI control for these missiles, purely because missiles can also be a little expensive sometimes, just as far as both creating them and shooting them. So if you're in some form of adventure mode or something where you are reliant on missiles, do keep that in mind, because these launchers, 800 materials per launcher. So of course this is gonna be quite expensive, which is why normally if we're doing some kind of adventure mode, I would really recommend starting with a small amount. Now we're doing okay. We don't need a small amount because we're very rich in our designer mode here, so that's not as important for us. But of course, if that is something that matters to you, then don't hesitate to just do one at a time or something along those lines. Now we've reached this kind of 1 block below the surface. This is usually where I would prefer to put my hatch. You can actually see where the hatch is lined up to be. Like, we're able to set it down like this, form this little hatch, and voila, there we go. So now we have our missiles, and you will probably just think, okay, now it's all done, and just shoot them off. But here's the thing, they don't really know what they're doing. They're not actual missiles yet. Oh, actually, well, this is probably because I already have a missile of this size. But normally, this missile setup here will not have a saved missile for you. So let's talk missile editing. The most important part is over here on this right side, lifetime and thrust duration. Those, to me, are the most important parts. Now, it does depend, again, on what you're looking for. Like, if you want something that reloads really quickly, of course. But we're looking at thrust duration and lifetime. So normal small missiles, which is what these ones are very short with their lifetime. They only have about 10 seconds of life. And let's say that we don't really want that, right? We want a longer lifetime. So we're going to go to utility, and we're going to go and look under regulator. This essentially adds 100% of the lifetime to the missile. So you'll see we'll click this and we're up to 20 seconds. This is really important for if you're doing something that's very long range. So an example would be something like a torpedo or a long range missile. Do keep that in mind. Alright, we're going to add maybe one more regulator and another fuel tank, because the second most important thing is going to be, of course, that thrust duration. Now, if you click on the variable thrust right here, you can see thrust output right there. Now, we have it set to maximum right now, which is why we have such a short amount of duration for having 3 fuel tanks. But you'll see we can lower it all the way to nothing, and we get 145.8 seconds. So it can really be stretched pretty well. But here, we're going to set it right to 30 seconds. Now, I tend to go a little bit low because they honestly can kind of coast a little bit. So I tend to think that the greater the thrust output, the more it glides. So that's also personal opinion. That does not entirely convert to other methods of missiles. Now, personally, I also really like setting a kind of start delay for the launch. So at this moment it's set to 1 second, but I actually would usually set it to about 1.5 because this kind of gets that interesting look of the missile goes up, kind of turns towards the enemy and goes straight towards them. Now, another thing that I would also like to do is thrust before locking. This sometimes can be useful because if the missile unlocks itself, it will slow down a little bit before it relocks. This helps if it's something like a hard to hit like aircraft or something like that, and you have anti-air missiles. This way they will essentially make sure that they're aiming the right way before just going straight at it. So now we just click copy to all matching launch pads. It's very important that you do this because you don't want to be making the same missile over and over and over again for every launch pad. So we're going to click that. Now you can also save and load other missiles. So of course for this example, we're probably using this missile small right here, which is probably what loaded up to begin with. But of course it depends on the size of the missile and of course many other factors. Alright, and now that we have finished these, we can of course just go ahead and load this up, and let's spawn something in. Probably just something easy. We'll do a strike, spawn it in, and just point right at it and click. Boom. That was about a second of holding, and all of our missiles go right on off and smack them. And you see they tend to do a very good job of tracking the plane and of course catching up. Now there are some planes of course that are going to be much faster, and honestly some of them just can't really be hit with missiles, so do keep that in mind if you're trying to have a specific target in mind or something along those lines. That 30-second thrust duration really helps these missiles just work very hard to provide a good amount of tracking and of course hitting our target. Alright, so now that we know that our inside missiles are doing a good job, we can start working on some torpedoes. So for this one, we're going to start by building a little turret here. So we're going to go over here and we're going to click one axis turret. Doesn't need to be a very big one, we're not looking for anything super crazy. And just click. Now this brings in our sub-object building mode, which only is activated when it's on this turret, as I'm sure you know from working with those other turrets in the previous video. Okay, so I think we're gonna start by just getting a gantry down right here. We want our turret to kind of turn and be symmetrical, so we're gonna maybe do about 3 blocks in width. So we're gonna end up with our launcher right here. Oh, put the gantries the wrong way. Now make sure that sometimes you can get an error message basically saying that the missile launcher is not connected to the gantries. Now that can be an issue. That can be an issue sometimes, and it's purely a matter of orientation that we have. So do keep that in mind, that sometimes you just could have it the gantries or the launchers orientated the wrong way. Alright, and we're gonna add our staggered fire. We're gonna set this to be a little bit longer, probably about 1 second. Because again, these are torpedoes, so we want them to be a little bit more, I would say almost like time consuming, because a little goes a long way with these missiles sometimes. And we're just going to do a simple little body here. Again, I'm not going to set these to be AI controlled, but you're more than welcome to. Something just really simple. Now, of course, we are going to have to go to our controller and set this to be a command, and go to our turret and do the same thing. But that's not anything too difficult, and again, we did go over that in the previous video, so if you have any other questions, including how to build this very nice, simple boat basic, this very nice, simple, basic boat, you're more than welcome to go check that out. It's probably going to be in the same little playlist as this video. Alright, and now let's work on editing these. So this is currently still set to one of those missiles, but we don't want those. We want a torpedo. So I'm going to start. You know what? So we're going to just start from scratch. We're going to make sure that we click torpedo propeller. This is, of course, very important. Now, something to know, if you do a variable thruster, you can do a secondary torpedo propeller, but it is a little finicky sometimes, and I find that it doesn't work as well as just having either a straight torpedo propeller or a straight missile. Now, the fins and the fuel tanks don't need to be changed. Actually, nothing about the payload needs to be changed. These are all okay. The fins work underwater. Everything works exactly the same almost. Now, something that I do want to change is I want to add a turning thruster. So this helps the actually, no, we're not going to do that. Never mind. Don't even do that. So something that I do want to add is another regulator, so up to about 40 seconds this time. And then, of course, the appropriate amount of thrust duration, which we're going to set to 40 seconds. Or just a little bit under if we can. Yeah, looks like full thrust works very well. Now, we also need to set this active radar seeker to a torpedo sonar. The active radar seeker is, in my opinion, the best missile head, purely because it's based on radar. Now, it is a little susceptible to sometimes flares, sometimes like a buoy or another missile, but it's still what I feel to be the best all-around missile head. Now, torpedo sonar is pretty much the only one that I go with for your torpedoes. You could also do an infrared, which detects heat, and that's useful for if you're hunting a submarine and you want it to like hit specifically around the propellers or the engine area of the submarine. But again, I think torpedo sonar just kind of simply works the best. Now, personally, when I am making a torpedo, I prefer to have it be both a EMP warhead, which targets electrical or kind of AI, any kind of logic and turret function, and a fragment warhead, because these work best with armor or something along those lines. Perfect against getting into submarines and then kind of killing their AI pretty quickly. Alright, so now we have set our... Ooh, actually no, we have a little extra space here. You know what we could use this for is more more payload, because obviously that's what we need in life. Now, I have found that it doesn't particularly matter where the placement of the warhead is versus where the utility placement is. I kind of prefer to have the warhead in the front just because it makes logical sense to me, but it doesn't entirely matter, and this could be considered a secondary charge or something along those lines. Alright, now we are ready to test out our little torpedo here. So let's just spawn in. Ooh! Now, something I did forget about is we want a... Let's see if I can find it. We want a ballast tank. So this is very important for torpedoes. See, the missiles and the torpedoes always are lighter than the water. So if you don't have this ballast tank here, which weighs the torpedo to a neutral area, the torpedo will struggle to go downwards. It'll basically just kind of float on the top of the water, which can mess with the fuel because the propellers won't work if they're out of the water, or it could just be messy. So we don't really want to do that. Make sure you have your ballast tank and you set it to about 0. Alright, now we are just about ready. Now, I just noticed that I didn't have this this set to be a hatch. It doesn't entirely matter if it's a hatch or not. I do believe that the hatches have better armor, but it's not entirely necessary. Alright, so let's spawn in a little ship here. Maybe just a Marauder, just to be nostalgic. I have not seen these in a very long time. But let's go ahead and just launch them right at them. You can see they shoot in a pretty good format. They don't take like way too long to shoot, but they also are very evenly spread out. Now we can just follow them like this, but we're actually going to press caps lock and oh never mind, I messed it up. Well, we could press caps lock, and that would track the last projectile fired, which can be helpful. And you see that little blue streak there is from the EMP, and of course the fragmentation is getting at it. Put a nice little divot inside this Marauder here, and helped kill some of those AI control blocks as you see them kind of floating out right there. All in all, I think that was a good little torpedo launcher. Now I think that's going to be it for this tutorial. I just wanted to show y'all the usefulness and the applications of missiles and torpedoes. Of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I think I'll be working on either advanced cannons and CWIS or some kind of particle cannon, plasma cannon tutorial next. Well, we'll see how it goes. Until then, I hope that y'all enjoyed another episode of From the Depths Boat Building Basics, and feel free to like, share, subscribe, comment, absolutely anything. I'm happy to have y'all here. Y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.